I am very excited to introduce our next presenter. For our next session, we have Diane Elkins. She is the co-owner of eLearning Uncovered, which provides training and resources to eLearning developers. And she also is the co-owner of Artisan eLearning, a custom eLearning development company specializing in Articulate Storyline, Lectora, and Captivate. She has built a reputation as a national e-learning expert by being a frequent speaker at major industry events. You've probably seen her at ATD ICE, ATD Techknowledge, DevLearn, or Learning Solutions. She is also the co-author of the popular eLearning Uncovered book series and eLearning Fundamentals, a practical guide from ATD Press. She's a past board member of the Northeast Florida and Metro DC chapters of ATD. So she knows a lot about e-learning, and today she's here to tell us how to optimize our e-learning courses for screen readers. And so without further ado, Diane, I am going to make you the presenter, and you can take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And let me share my screen. Okay, and Stephanie, can you let me know if you see before we begin?
It is taking my computer a moment to catch up, but I think that we are good to start.
Okay,
yes,
wonderful.
It looks great.
Hello, everybody. I've been watching in the background with the last two presenters who gave us just a really great foundation of some of the why we do this. And there were a number of questions coming in where people were excited to get to the how. And I'm going to share some of that with you. And two caveats. Number one, I'm running WebEx, Storyline, Lectora. I'll be running a screen reader. So let's just hope that my computer just keeps up with me. And if not, we will run with it. The other is that normally when I teach accessibility for Storyline, it's a full day. So I will answer every question I have time for down to the last nanosecond of our time slot. But I'll be hitting the biggest areas as opposed to all of the nuances. So what I'd love to do is use a mantra from the world of fiction writing or movie making, and that is show, don't tell. Don't tell me someone's sad, show me he's sad. So I'm going to show what it is like to go through, in this case, a Storyline course with a screen reader before doing anything for the accessibility, just using the absolute default settings as if it didn't matter. What's it like to go through with that? And then what's it like to go through it after you've done the optimization? So this is a Storyline example, but it would be very similar to Lectora and Captivate. And I'll also spend some time, a little bit of time looking at that as well for us. So the first thing I'll do is fire up Nvda. So Nvda is one of the probably two most popular screen reading tools. Nvda I like because it's free. It's actually shareware or whatever you call it, where you make a donation. So I do encourage you to make a donation if you're going to download Nvda. So let me get that going.
Call center training demo.
Okay.
Call center training.
And Stephanie, can you confirm that you can hear that okay? Putting her on the spot. She didn't know I was going to ask her that.
I didn't, and I wasn't ready to unmute myself. I heard it. It is a little quiet.
Okay, let me see if I can
make it
move
louder. That would be
my microphone a little bit closer, my camera a little bit closer, I mean, my audio. I think my volume is all the way up. Okay. So it is really challenging to present while Nvda is going because we talk over each other all the time. So what you're seeing here is a text panel that has popped up that is showing you, for those who are able to see it, what you're also hearing. So it's a nice way to follow along. And let me see if I can make that just a little bit bigger. Hang on. No, actually my Zoom's not working right now. Okay, so we'll leave it at that side. So I'm going to go through this course now. And if you've never worked with a screen reader before, the way it works in most software is if you press the down arrow key, you go through every object on a page. If you use the tab key, you go through only the interactive objects. So I'm going to go through the whole page using the down arrow key, except where I say otherwise. Okay, so let me refresh the page and we'll start over.
Call center training.
Okay, call center training. Call center training.
Untitled slide.
It gave us the name of the course, and then it just said slide, untitled slide. So even though I don't have a slide name on the screen reader is picking up the name of the slide, and it's just untitled slide. I'm going to hit the down arrow. Picture one. So now I'm going to play the role of someone who might be using this. And just so you know, I do not use a screen reader in my daily life. Corrected, I have 20/20 vision. But I will do my best to simulate the experience based on having observed people go through similar content. Okay, picture one. I don't know what that is. Down arrow before we begin. Okay.
Oval one.
Oval one. I don't care about an oval.
Oval two.
Oval two.
Oval three.
Seriously, you're wasting my time.
Rectangle two.
Come on.
Tell us your first
Okay, tell us your first name. Okay, I can do that. Let's see, what's next?
button rectangle.
Button rectangular huts. What's that? Is that how I enter my name? Am I supposed to click that to enter my name? No, let me keep going and see what I find. Down arrow.
Name your edit multi-line.
Okay, so that's a text entry box because I know that because that's how they're interpreted by a screen reader. So I'll press enter and my name. Okay, then I'm going to tab out of this interactive object.
Search tabs menu button.
Search tab. I'm back up in the browser. So that must mean I'm done with the page. So how do I get off this page? Well, there was that button that I didn't know what it does. Maybe that's how I go to the next page. Let me see if I can find it. I'll just press the tab key.
Toolbar. Address.
Rectangular. Okay, well, let me press enter. See what happens. Okay, down arrow.
Clickable.
Group.
Oval two.
Oval 2. Seriously?
Oval one.
Oh, gee, fun. Okay, Hazel. Like hazelnut? Hazel, is that a person?
Hi.
Okay,
Clerk service fee that no one wants.
now it stopped there and I had to press down to finish that statement. That's just normal, that's not a problem. It reads in chunks as the default setting. Okay, so I'm guessing that that's some kind of conversation is happening, I'm guessing. Down arrow.
Graphic Walt.
Walt. Okay. So somebody's talking to Walt.
Graphic curve arrow down.
I don't know what that is.
Select a response.
Select a response. Okay, I'm supposed to select a response. I don't think I'm supposed to say rectangle. Let me keep going.
Rectangle. You probably misunderstood the guy.
Okay. Okay.
Talk to. Well, let's look. Let me pull up.
Oh, wait.
Do you happen to
Okay. So I just heard a question and then another, like, is that all one response I'm supposed to pick? Is that 2 responses? Is that 3 responses? I don't know what I just heard.
rectangle one?
Oh, seriously?
Button select.
Select, okay. So what am I selecting? Down.
Button select.
Select. I don't know what I'm selecting. Okay, so that's what would happen to me if I was going through this and nobody did anything to help out with screen reader. So I'd be completely confused. I'd have no idea what's going on. I'd be extremely frustrated and I wouldn't have learned a thing. So now let's go through the same course, the same 2 slides, and go through what it would be like if you had optimized.
Call center.
Okay, let me just do a refresh.
Button.
Okay. Slide, your name. Before it said slide, untitled slide. Okay, my name. Okay, great. Down arrow. Before we begin, tell us your first name. It skipped all that other stuff. Oval 1, picture 1, etc. Tell us your first name. Okay, down arrow. Okay, that's where I must enter it. Enter, D-I-N-E, tab, next slide. Okay, fantastic. Slide, a customer calls. Okay, so this is a conversation on the phone. Got it. Okay. Hi, Diane, da, da, da. Okay, got it. Customer service rep, okay. Select a response, okay. Response A, okay. Mm-hmm. Ah, okay. So I don't know yet. I want to listen to B, B, C. I don't know how many there are.
Response B. Well.
Okay, so now I'm on a new response. Select response B. Okay.
Blank.
Blank. Okay, so I think it looks like I have two. So now I can either up arrow and go back and listen again and make my decision, or I can tab back. And if I know for sure, I would do shift tab goes backwards. Tab goes forward, shift tab goes backwards. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a moment. So you can tell there are completely different experiences between the first and the second approach. So I'm going to pause Stephanie for just a minute to see if there's any initial feedback or questions. Otherwise, I'm going to jump into what made the difference specifically and how to get there yourself.
Yes, we do have one question. Can you explain the difference between a screen reader like Nvda, which you're showing here, and a text reader that might come with your computer operating system by default?
Good question. So most operating systems come with one. Windows, I can't remember what it's called. So if anybody knows, please put it in chat. I can't remember what it's called in Windows. The one in Windows is adequate. It's not nearly as full-featured. Nvda exists 100% to do this. JAWS exists 100% to do this. So for folks who use it in their daily lives, they are more likely to use one of these more advanced tools. Now, ideally, if it works in one, it should work in all of them. And, you know, that's probably not true. Just like you can put up a Storyline or a Captivate or Lectora course in Chrome and it might work a little differently than in Edge or on Mac Safari. So you're likely to have some differences. Okay, good.
Okay.
Anything else
We
for
are
now?
getting, that's the only question. We got a couple comments saying the Windows text reader is named Cortana or Narrator. It probably depends
Narrator.
on the version of Windows you are
Yes.
on. Oh, and one
Yep.
final question before we
Yep.
move on. What does clickable landmark mean when you see that in the screen reader?
Yeah, I don't understand why it says clickable, quite frankly. Landmark region is that pages are organized into sections, and so sometimes it announces a section. Especially if I had the player, different parts of the player would be considered landmarks, and it lets the learner know you're in a different part of the slide. And lots of things announce as clickable that aren't, and I personally, I'll be honest, I don't understand why.
The mysteries of life.
It is, yes.
Can you use Nvda for transcription purposes?
Nvda is pulling what I told it to say anyway. So I don't know, it doesn't listen to audio and transcribe it. What it's doing is it's pulling behind the scenes text on the slide. It just isn't pulling audio. So I don't know that it would be used for transcription.
Okay. All right.
But having this panel is handy though. It is handy because when I'm testing, sometimes I'll go, wait a minute, what did it just say? And being able to just go back and read it instead of having to listen, or if I want to take a screenshot and send it to my developer and say, hey, here's what's happening behind the scenes on your slide. Can you figure that out?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things to do to get your course ready for a screen reader, and I'm going to focus on two major things. One is alt text and one is focus order. So I'm going to go back to the bad version. And actually, let me refresh. So if you'll remember, on this one, it said oval 1, oval 2, oval 3. So one of the best things you can do that does not take a lot of time when you're trying to optimize for screen readers is pull out anything that's decorative. So the oval ones, those are these 3 circles right here. This is 3 circles, and this is the rectangle. They don't need, nobody needs to hear those. So elements like that that are pure design features, pull it out, and I'll show you where you do that in just a minute. Other images is a little iffier. This came up a little bit when Janet was talking, like this office background here, this blurred office background. Does someone who can't see need to be told what that is? And there's no formal right or wrong answer. In this case, even with seeing it, I barely even know what it is. So I probably wouldn't bother. In fact, I didn't on this one. Could you choose to do that? Definitely. A couple of things to think about when deciding how to do these, what I call them is decorative with content. So if it's purely decorative, like a circle, out of there. If it has very clear content, yes, we want to put it in, we want to keep it in. But these, it's kind of decorative, but there's also content. It's not just a circle. That is an office. I used to lean towards including a description for a screen reader to read. And the reason why is my friend Jessica. So I have a friend who is visually impaired. She's legally blind. She uses a screen reader, but she has a little bit of vision. So like if we were going to meet at a meeting, and especially if she knew I was coming and I walked in, she could probably recognize me from A, expecting me, and B, knowing in general what I look like. So she wouldn't know what that image is, but she has some vision. In fact, she beat me once in air hockey. You know, big red puck, big white playing surface. She could see to that level, but she wouldn't be able to tell what this image is. And so I think about her and that she could tell there's something there. And it might distract her by wondering if she's missing out on something. So even though there's no real content, if someone who can see a little goes, but I want to know what that is, well, we should tell them. But then the flip side is, every single piece of information you put about an image, somebody has to listen to and interpret. And that takes time and it takes mental effort. And so we do need to be careful about somebody's cognitive load. And we need to be careful, be respectful of the time in their day. Because if it takes me 15 minutes to go through a course, but it takes someone with a screen reader 30 minutes because they're hearing about this guy in a blue collared shirt wearing a pair of glasses, like that is unnecessary information that they have to listen to in real time. You and I might glance at an image and in a split second decide if it's relevant or not, and we will tune it out. But if instead you or I had to listen to that description, we'd have to listen it and actively decide whether or not to care about it. So I have moved more in time to erring on the side of pulling it out unless it's necessary. Janet talked a lot about getting feedback and talking to people. And I think that's a good thing to do here. If you have individuals in your organization who will be going through your content, get their preferences. Just keep one thing in mind, that no one person can speak for a collective group of people, and they are likely to have different opinions. I did ask my friend Jessica, I said, would you want to know what this image is? And she said, absolutely, but someone else might have a different opinion. If you don't have that kind of access with your audience, you can go to, any number of focus groups. Janet mentioned government agencies. Most universities have an access office. Another thing that you can do is refer to the experts. So the be quiet. The W3C is the group that basically governs the internet, and they're the ones who created the WCAG standards, and they have some really great tutorials, and they go pretty hardcore about pulling things out, about not including things that are even remotely decorative. I mean, even remotely have some content. So if you're interested, I will put this chat here in for Stephanie to share with everybody. But it helps you walk through, should I include this as alt text or should you not? So number one, if you can go with your users, that's the best feedback to get. If not, go with the experts and what they prefer. So getting back to our requirements here. So to optimize this screen, there are things I'd want to pull out completely from screen reader order, called focus order in Storyline, called tab order in Captivate and Lectora. So that's one of the things I need to do. One of the other things I need to do then is decide for anything that is visual content that does matter, I have to give it a description for that screen reader to pick up. Now in all three tools, Captivate, Storyline, Lectora, if you are typing in the authoring tool, the screen reader is going to pick it up automatically. So here, hi Diane, I just got my bill. We typed that in Storyline. And so the screen reader is automatically going to pick it up. I don't have to do anything. This button here where I typed the word select in Storyline, screen reader is going to pick it up automatically. If I had made an image in Photoshop that said select, no, then the screen reader is not going to pick it up automatically. But anything you actually type in the authoring tool will get picked up automatically. So then you need to think about the images. So I'm going to put my speech viewer over here. You know what? I'm going to close out of Nvda for now. We can pull it back up if we need to. So now we have two images and we have to decide, how much do I want to say? This just said Hazel, and do you know why? Because that's what it was, that's her name in the Storyline library. And so when you pull it in, it comes in at that default, and I'll show you where that is in a minute. So do I need to say it's a customer on the phone? Do I need to say it's a woman on the phone? Do I have to say it's a woman on the phone with gray hair? Do I need to say she's Caucasian? Do I need to say she has a neutral expression on her face? You have to include exactly what's relevant, but no more. Because again, we need to be respectful of time and cognitive load. But if it's important, we should put it in. So this is about an escalating customer situation. So we probably should say that she has a neutral expression, because later on, it will not be a neutral expression. So you would have to make decisions about how much detail to include. Okay, so those are the basic things that we'll talk about in terms of alt text. So that's one category. Pull things out and give description where needed. And then the second, sorry, just hit my microphone. The second section of tasks that we'll look at today is the concept of focus order or tab order. So if you'll recall, the first time I went through this slide, it said, tell us your first name. Then it went to the next button, and then it went to name here. So in all three tools, there's a default order by which a screen reader will read the content. It's our job to put it in a logical order. You don't put the instructions after the question. You don't put the submit button first. So having a logical order. And those are the things that we will look at in the three tools. Stephanie, I'll do a quick pause for any comments or questions before I jump in and show you where those things are done in Storyline.
Yes, we have got a handful of questions. So let's see, I'll do like the most recent one first. Regarding the buttons you were just talking about, do screen readers read the word on the button or the name of the button object? Then this person says they use Lectora, so they're talking about the name of the button object in the panel explorer.
Yeah, with most tools, if you're typing the words, it will read what you have typed. For other things in Lectora, it's what it's named in the Title Explorer. Same thing with the text box. It might be called text box 1 in your Title Explorer, but it's actually going to read the text.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. And then these are a couple Storyline questions. Does the screen reader, how does it treat groups? And does it read elements on the master slide as well?
Good. I'll get to those as soon as we jump in. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we'll just do this one last question.
Yep.
Is it enough to test your content using only one screen reader or one browser? How much testing do you need to do? What's kind of like the industry standard?
That's a great question, and there's no perfect answer, just like there's no perfect answer for any testing. You know, if I want to say I want my course to work on Android devices, well, how many Android devices are there out there? You know, and it's an open operating system. So it could be, you know, so completely different. What we choose to do in most cases is one browser on one screen reader on one browser, and we determine what it is collectively with our client. And it's usually either Nvda or JAWS on Chrome is what we most often pick. Could you have a different experience on another tool? Yes. Again, I would go to your user base, and if you can find out what they're using, that'd be great. And then you just have to make an internal decision about how you want to do that. But I would never want to say, yes, we have made this accessible and not test it on anything. Because until you get in there, you just don't know.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so let's go into Storyline and look at where some of these things happen. We'll focus first on the alt text. Remember, if it's a text box, we don't have to do anything unless for some unusual reason you want the screen reader to read something other than what's actually there. That's pretty rare for that to happen. So if I have a circle here, my oval 3, there are a couple of ways I can pull it out of the tab order. So if I go to the size and position dialog box, or specifically the accessibility tab in the size and position dialog box, which popped up on my other window, here I have the alt text, and so if I wanted to give it something purposeful, I would type it here, but instead I say, no, thank you. Now, what's nice about the size and position dialog box is you don't have to close it between uses, so I can now select oval 2, get rid of it, and oval 1, and get rid of it. And then rectangle, etc., or I can type. So the size and position dialog box, the accessibility tab, is where you can manage it if you want to do it on a one-on-one basis. Another way that you could manage your alt text is in the focus order dialog box. It used to be called tab order. And here, also popping up on my other one, here is every single object on your slide. And you can do a couple of things. First of all, when you select it, do you see how it highlights in red what it is? So that's my background picture if I wasn't sure. And so I can delete it here. This does not mean I'm deleting it from the slide. It means I'm deleting it from focus order. And it's the same thing as I just did for the ovals in size and position where I unchecked that box. This is doing the exact same thing. Before we begin, I do not need to add alternative text because it will be red. Rectangle, don't need that. Tell us your first name. Oops, I didn't mean to delete that. Well, you can go here and pull it back. Or you can go into size and position dialog box and put the check back in. Okay, so before we begin, tell us your first name. Hotspot 1 is right here, and that's one that I'm going to have to do some alternative text. It doesn't say anything. So I would say next slide. And by the way, I am moving away from icon-only buttons, not for screen reader users, but for voice command users. If I have a mobility concern, I might want to use voice recognition software to drive my computer where I can say, File menu, Save, and it performs those commands. Well, if I don't know what that button's called, I can't trigger a voice command for it. So I can call it next slide behind the scenes all I want, but if I am a sighted user who has a mobility issue and wants to use voice command to control the computer, I don't know what to call that. So I'm moving away from icon-only buttons. Okay, name here, that's fine. Half frame, that's the symbol below the hotspot. I don't need that at all. And then I have that line. I don't need that. So I just have before we begin, tell us your first name, next slide, and the screen reader will announce it as a button, so I don't need to say next slide button and then name here. And then I would do something similar on this one. Now here I chose to say response A because the screen reader, it's not always obvious when one response ended and the next response began. So response B, and I'm calling them responses because that's what the instructions say. I wouldn't say option A if it says select a response. I want everything to match so it's super clear. And then the same thing here, I can do select response A. Or I could leave it as select and in focus order. Actually, I've got so much because of my feedback layers. I'm just going to do the easier way. Control Shift enter, by the way, brings up size and position dialog box. I could just say select response B here. And that way it says select visually, but select response B for someone who can't tell it's visually aligned with B. Now you might think, well, what about that person using a voice command? Well, if I have two buttons that say select and I tell my computer to do select, it will highlight both and put a 1 and a 2 over them, and I just say which one of those two select buttons. So I think I like select response A and select response B better. Okay, so alt text, to recap, we either pull things out using either the trash can here in the size and position dialog, or in the focus order dialog box, or we go to size and position and we uncheck that box. Then if we want to add alt text, we either do it right here or we do it in focus order. We can also do a lot of this in the media library. So in the media library, here I have all of the images in the course. And so if I wanted to put alt text on this picture, I could just do it right here. And this is a nice way to do everything in your whole course all at once if you want to. So that can be a handy way to do things. So that is how you would set up your alt text in Storyline. I'll do the focus order next in Storyline, and then Stephanie, I'll come to you for any Storyline specific questions. So now let's talk a little bit about focus order. That is done, imagine that, in the focus order dialog box. And let me go to the simpler slide first. So it starts with the default, and each of the three tools has a different default. None of the three are the same. In Storyline, the default order is top to bottom visually on the slide. And if two objects are at the same level, then it goes left to right. And it's based on the object. So like on a text box, you know, there's often a little space above it. So it's not where the T starts, it's where the top of the text box object starts. So sometimes something that you think is above it isn't actually. So that's the default. And if I want something unique, I would create a custom focus order. And then from there, I can drag and drop. So next slide should be the last thing that they get. So I drag and drop. So before we begin, tell us your first name, name here, next slide. Okay, so you would drag and drop and rearrange. We had a question earlier about master slide objects. Master slide objects will show up here. You can move them, but you can't change them. Like if you want to, if I have a, like if I really wanted that background image to show up and that background was on my master slide, I'd have to go to the master slide. So I don't believe this one uses slide masters, but let's just say I had something, let me just put a shape, a smiley face. So let's say that that mattered. Well, when I'm on my slide master, I don't have a focus order dialog box. So the only way to do it on a master slide is the size and position dialog box on the accessibility tab. So some things you can manage at the slide level, but some things you have to do on the master level. And then the same thing is true with layers, is layers are also managed here. So you can see how I have feedback option 1. So everything here, feedback option 1, those are all the objects on that layer. Clearly there's a lot of cleanup work to do. Feedback option 2. And then where it says untitled slide, that's my master, that's my main slide content. And so I would need to manage all of that. Okay, so focus order is done exclusively through the focus order dialog box if you want something other than top to bottom, left and right. Okay, Stephanie, I will field any additional questions about Storyline.
I think those are all the Storyline specific questions that we had. We have some general screen reading questions. If you want, we can go through those right now.
Let's tackle those, absolutely.
Okay, so you mentioned moving away from using icon-only buttons. Do you mean you're intentionally using buttons with words on them now, as opposed to like the hamburger menu?
Yes. Yeah, so if I were to have that, if I did want that arrow icon, I would just have a little piece of text underneath it that said next slide.
Okay, perfect.
And that would be helpful for everybody.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
in case they didn't know what that little caret meant.
And then how do you handle animations?
Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, so if you want to synchronize elements to audio, so let's see these faded in one at a time. If they all fade in within, say, the first 10 seconds, just like a little effect, that's probably fine. But let's say I had an audio track and one of the, let's say that the speech bubble from the customer comes in first, and then it disappears, and then the responses appear. Anytime you have things appearing and disappearing like that, you're asking your screen reader user to basically play whack-a-mole. You know, the carnival game where, you know, moles pop up from holes and you have to pop them before they disappear. So imagine I'm going through the slide and some of the content hasn't appeared yet. So I already visited that part of the slide. Once I've passed it, then something appears. I have no idea there's new content there. I'm not going to go back and find it, so I will never see it. Similarly, I'm going through the slide and stuff I haven't gotten to yet has now disappeared. I'll never even knew it was there. So in the past at Artisan, we used to have a no synchronization rule for accessible content. But we have changed our philosophy on that based on a fair amount of user testing. We did some trials with some customers who they had both a formal accessibility team that did really strict testing, and then they also had user focus groups. And it all tested very well. Very often, your images are merely reflecting what's in your audio anyway. And so this gets back to what even needs alt text. So if my audio and accompanying closed captioning or transcript or whatever says, hey, if you see harassment, report it to your supervisor or to HR. And there's an icon that says supervisor and an icon that says HR. Do you really need alt text for that? Because the audio has already explained that. The visual is not adding new information. And so we did a pilot where as long as it was in the audio, and again, corresponding closed caption and or transcript, if it's not providing anything new, let's just pull it out completely. Otherwise, again, it's going to take someone twice as long to go through the course. Because if I have vision and hearing, I'm going to listen to that audio while I'm seeing those images. If I'm using a screen reader, I have to do them in separately. I maybe choose which one to do first, but let's say I listen to all the audio. I get all the information. Now I go through all the objects and it just told me the exact same thing that you already told me. Like I've gained no new perspective. You've just taken more time out of my life. So that's something that we're looking at now as a way to reduce the cognitive load, the time, and also allow us to have the more engaging visuals for those who would appreciate them, is let the audio serve as part of your alternative text and then describe anything that isn't adequately handled in the audio. But I would encourage you to work with your users to see if that's an appropriate approach.
Great answer. All right, we have one last question and then I'll let you move on.
Okay.
How necessary is it to use the header tags for e-learning content?
Yes, so the heading tags are great. And as I mentioned, it's going to be difficult to go through everything that you might need to know. But let me just put in a basic title and content slide. So 6 tips. Here are my tips. Okay, if you can see.
Those are good tips.
Oh, thank you. So I just wrote 6 tips at the top, a couple of gobbledygook. And if you can see, there is a visual hierarchy that gives you meaning. You can tell that the 6 tips are overarching among those. And maybe I even have, maybe we're talking about the different, like the Fiori 5. And I say, hands, and I have 3 tips. And then I say mind, and I have 3 more tips. And I might use visually, I might use bolding, I might use color, I might use size to create a visual hierarchy. Well, if you can't see that hierarchy, you lose out on structural information that might be helpful to you. And so Storyline has the ability to give things a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 tag. And a screen reader will pick that up. So it would say heading 1, 6 tips. Or I forget, it might say 6 tips, then heading 1. I forget which it does first. And then it will say heading 2. So that's going to help me. If I cannot see the visual structure, it's going to help me structure it. It also helps me navigate a page because I can use keyboard shortcuts like the H key lets me go from heading to heading to heading. So sometimes I want to orient myself to the page first. First, find out what headings there are, especially if you have a lot of text-heavy slides. Having that kind of structure is really helpful. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So again, there is a lot more that you can do. I could talk for an hour on just the player settings that are helpful, but your big things are going to be your tab or focus order and your alt text. So now I'm going to switch over to Lectora. Lectora was my first authoring tool in 2003, I think, and it's where I first learned accessibility. So it also has the ability to establish focus order, and it also has the ability to do alt text. It just does it in some different ways. So first we'll talk about alt text. So here we have the title Explorer. And so it just reminds me, somebody asked about groups and storyline. I do need to go back to that in a minute. Stephanie, if you can help me remember. So here in Lectora, just like in Storyline, if you don't do anything to alt text, it's going to be the name of the image. So when I brought in these three, these are what they were called: very happy LG, suspicious LG, angry LG. That's what a screen reader would say if I don't do anything about it. And if I want to change that, what I would do is I would change the name right here. So in Lectora, what you see in the title Explorer is the image, or is the alt text. So I would say happy customer, and I would say, I know it says suspicious, but I think that's a neutral customer. It doesn't seem very neutral. Anyway, I'd have to decide what I want to say. And I would say angry customer. Well, let's talk about groups for just a minute. I don't believe, unless someone can tell me otherwise, I don't believe that in Lectora you can, the groups are picked up by a screen reader. In Storyline, they are. If these three were grouped, it would be 4 objects in focus order, the group and the 3 items. And so what I might choose to do if I was in Storyline is pull the 3 individual objects out of alt text or out of focus order and just put a single tag on the group. Customer in a range of expressions from happy to mad. You know, that's probably more useful than going to 3 individual objects and having to hit the down arrow 3 individual times. If I wanted to do that here in Lectora, what I could do is maybe just put all the alt text on one of the 3 and pull the other 2 out, and it serves the same purpose. So whatever I put here in the file in the Project Explorer is what will be picked up by a screen reader. And if I want to pull something out completely, like this gradient background is actually a box, on the Properties tab, I can check the box for empty alt tag. So that's how I would pull it out completely. So that is alt text. Focus order in Lectora is different in that it is handled in a couple of ways. One is that it goes from top to bottom in the Title Explorer. So it's not how it's arranged visually on the slide. Storyline is top to bottom visually on the slide. Lectora is top to bottom in the Project Explorer. Now I can rearrange these, but I have to be careful because these also represent your front to back order. So if I rearrange these for screen reader order, I need to make sure that I don't mess up my front to back order and end up hiding something behind an image that I didn't want to have hide behind the image. So top to bottom with 2 exceptions. One is anything that in the properties has always on top is going to be read first, even if it's not first in the top to bottom order. And Lectora doesn't really have the concept of a master slide per se. Instead, it inherits objects from a higher level. Anything inherited from a higher level will also be read first. So those are some of the things that you'll want to consider with your alt text and your focus order. Okay, questions about any of that?
So my sources are telling me that groups are not picked up by the screen reader in Lectora.
Thank you for confirming.
And then, yes. we have, these are not Lectora specific questions, but they are related.
Okay.
So if you're giving instructions for a multiple choice question and the user has to click submit button at the end, what would be the most accessible word to use instead of click, since not all learners are actually clicking depending on what they're using?
That's a good question. At Artisan, we have switched almost exclusively to the word select. And that helps with buttons for people using a screen reader and even touchscreen devices. You know, if you're touching a screen, you know, you're not clicking. That's one of those that I wouldn't get too caught up on because it doesn't cause confusion. I can't imagine there's anybody who's on their phone and it says click the begin button and they go, oh no, I can't click. I won't be able to. I mean, they know how buttons work on the phone, and the same thing is probably true if they're using a screen reader. So I don't think it would cause confusion, and that's the language you need to fix first, is anything that would cause confusion. Click the green button would cause confusion if you couldn't see it. Click the button below. If you're using a screen reader, what's above, what's below? You know, if it's something like that that's unclear, you absolutely want to fix it. But I do encourage inclusive language. Things like saying select is just more inclusive. That was, we talked about that when we were looking at your scenarios earlier, where it said listen to their examples, and you weren't actually listening. But even if you were listening, not everyone will be listening. Learn more about their story.
Very true.
Yeah. See what happens next. Listen to their thoughts. Once you start really thinking about it and you put that filter over everything you do, it's amazing how much sense-based language that you probably use.
Yeah, without even thinking about it. We'll do one last question before you move on. Where do you stand in the order of the student prompt? This person is saying they got dinged by a government 508 reviewer because the student prompt didn't show up first.
By student prompt, I assume that means like if there's which of the following is an example of a decorative image?
Yeah, so they're saying the prompt was select the correct answer.
Select the correct
and that
answer.
didn't show up first.
So what they were saying is it should show up before the question instead of after the question?
Apparently, yes. What they're saying is they got dinged by a 508 reviewer because it wasn't showing up.
Okay, so there is no WCAG standard saying it should or shouldn't come before. The WCAG standard says a logical order. And one of the other big tenets of accessibility is consistency, reliability. Like if you figured it out, don't make me refigure it out on the next screen and the next screen and the next screen. So I would say that your tester was imposing a personal preference, which they get to do. I mean, I've been working on accessible content, I think now for 12 years. And when I go through a formal external test, this is what I do. And if you can't see me, I'm like closing my eyes and crossing all my fingers because I don't know if their interpretation will be the same as mine. Now, fortunately, it is better with WCAG standards than it was with the original 508 standards, which were way more subjective. So like, that's an easy thing to fix. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's not hard to fix unless you've got 23 hours of content. So if I wanted to play hardball, which I sometimes will, especially if I feel like it's somebody imposing a personal preference, is I'll say, great, can you let me know which standard you would be failing me for? And that way you can talk in terms of the standards. But you know, it also depends who that person is, what their perspective is, what their power is, and what their influence is. Because, you know, one person's perspective is super important if it's, you know, one of your users and maybe even one of the few users. And if they think it's clearer and it's not that hard, then yeah, make that change. But there is a lot of interpretation, even with the WCAG standards.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so let's switch to Captivate. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention about Lectora is, each tool I think has different strengths and weaknesses. Like in Storyline, I think one of the advantages is that focus order dialog box where I can manage everything in one place. Storyline has the most control over focus order versus the other two programs because you can do it independent from any other factor. Rearranging the focus order does not affect your front to back. So that's really good. One of the advantages that I think Lectora has is they have an extra ability that lets you skip repetitive content. That's one of the WCAG standards, is if you have like a logo and some other things on your slide itself, I shouldn't have to listen to that logo 23 times in a 23 slide course. Captivate and Storyline don't have the ability to skip content that you as the author put on the slide. Lectora does. So that's a big advantage there. Okay, so then in Captivate, a lot of it is going to be very similar in terms of alt text, focus order, a lot of the same concepts. So here I'll select an image, and by default it's going to read, actually I think the file name, not the image name here, I believe it's the file name. But then if I want to put in my own alt text, I would click this button here and select accessibility. By default, all objects are auto-labeled, which means, just again, the name of the image, or if it's a shape, it'll say Smart Shape 23 or whatever. So I would turn off the auto-label, and then in accessibility name, I would put daily parking garage at an airport. One thing that Captivate does that the other tools don't is it has room for both a short and a long description if you want that. I've never actually used both, but you do have that as an option. So if you want to add your own alt text, you would do that. Straight text boxes, buttons with text, you don't have to do anything to, just like with the other two tools. And then if I instead wanted to take this shape out of focus order, so here I've just got a rounded edge rectangle, I'd once again go to the properties, click the menu button and accessibility. I would uncheck auto label, and then I would leave the fields blank. And that's how you take it out of focus order, is unchecking auto label. So again, advantages and disadvantages. It's nice that you have room for the long and short description if you have detailed graphics, but you do have to go in it's like a lot of clicks to get there. Now, I will say that everything I'm about to show you may not be true in 3 months. They have, Adobe has just done a sneak peek on a completely rebuilt Captivate that they're calling Project Charm. Everything is different. I watched the video like in minute detail, trying to scan every dialog box to go, okay, where's alt text? And I couldn't tell from the video I watched. They're going into public beta sometime this month. And so what I'm showing you today may not be true for very long, but I'll show you what I know. So again, you can pull things out of alt text. What are some of the advantages with Captivate? Well, one of the things that you can do in Captivate, if I click off of everything and I just have the slide properties here, I can go to accessibility for the slide, because sometimes it is not about the independent component parts. It's about the message as the whole. Now, that's not true on this particular slide, but maybe in some cases you just want a single message to describe the slide, and that would be the most useful for folks. With the other two tools, you would have to add a text box and just like tuck it behind an image or off the slide, and it'll still be picked up by a screen reader. So that's a nice little feature there. So that is how you would handle your alt text. You would either turn off auto label and type something, or turn off auto label and leave it empty. Then in terms of focus order, it's handled differently than the other two. With the timeline, in Lectora, it reads from top to bottom. Captivate reads from bottom to top. It's not sure why, but it does. So the default focus order is bottom to top in your timeline. Once again, you can rearrange things in your timeline to get the order you want, but you could end up messing up your front to back order because of that. However, you can manually change the order of your interactive objects. In Storyline, you have the ability to change the order of all objects. In Captivate, if you're at the slide property level, this menu also says tab order, and it shows all the interactive elements on your slide. And so you do have the ability to change the order there but only for the interactive elements. So the three are extremely similar in that all three of them let you do those same tasks, but they do manage them in different ways. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, Stephanie. Are there any lingering questions, new ones or ones I forgot to answer?
All right, so we have a couple Captivate specific questions, so
Okay.
I'll start with those since that's where we were just at. You were showing how it had those options for the name and then the longer description.
Mm-hmm.
Does the screen reader read both the name and the long description in the alt text one after the other? Or
Yes.
does it give the user an option to hear it? How does that work?
If you use the default settings in Nvda, it just reads one and then the other. One of the things that I would encourage all of you to do is get a screen reader, whether it's JAWS, whether it's Nvda, and learn how to use it. Because there are lots of settings. And so there are settings about speed, there are settings about whether or not punctuation is announced or not. And so there may be settings in different screen readers that let them choose one versus the other, but just the default in Nvda, it reads one and then the next.
Okay, so then in this situation, would it be acceptable to just do the name and not have a further description? Okay.
Yeah, I would just say daily parking garage at an airport. That's all you need. If you get to the HTML code, there are two different tags, and I'm not an HTML person. That is a personal choice I've made in my life. But I do know that there's a special tag. I think it's called long, LONGDESC, long description. And so it is tagged differently behind the scenes. And so that's why I would imagine that there are ways that it can be treated differently. But again, it's not the default. And I would just leave, you do not ever need to fill out the detailed one. But you know, what if I had, let's say, for example, we were using a 5-step model. And the first slide, I explained the full detail of the model. Here are the 5 steps, here's how they integrate. 3 slides later, I've got it again. That would be a great place where the accessibility name would be the 5-star customer service model. Well, that's only helpful if you remember what the 5 steps were. So maybe then give them the option to have the long description if they want that reminder. In that case, both would be helpful, and they could pick and choose if they have the right settings.
Awesome. Another Captivate question. For multi-state objects, does the screen reader only read the default state or all of them?
You can add alt text specific to each state. So if you go into state view, and I'm going to show you a little bit behind the curtain. I can't show it to you right now because I'm not actually in Captivate. This is a PowerPoint made to fake Captivate because I did not trust my computer to have Storyline, Lectora, and Captivate up at once, so I cannot show you. But if you were to click the state button and then click on a state, and then this button in accessibility, you could have a separate one for each. By default, it will have the same for all 3. So if I set it up for a button or whatever it is, state 1, it will flow to all of the other states, but then I can go in and manually override it for state 2, state 3, state 4.
All right, and we have a few minutes left, so I'll try to get to as many of these questions as we can. Okay. How do each of the authoring tools handle changing or hidden text that is displayed after an interaction? Like if you click something and the text reveals the answer or something like that.
Right. A lot depends on how it is set up, and the 3 tools handle it differently. Like in Storyline, you're likely to use layers especially. And so in Storyline, let's see, I do have a slide here with layers. What I typically do is any object that is revealed from a button comes directly after that button. So here, not only am I on a layer, but this layer is a click to reveal activity. So let me preview this slide. So I select this. Oops. Apparently, I don't have it set up for this preview, and this just goes to an end of demo. So basically, you click on each one, and a piece of text will appear. So in my focus order dialog box, I would make this first hotspot in the alt text, I would call that button. You probably misunderstood. And then the very next object in tab order would be the text box that appears. Then the next object, I would give alt text, not much I can do. And then the next object would be its pop-up text. So that's how I would generally do that in Storyline, whether it's using hidden images and show and hide versus maybe it's showing and hiding a layer. So it's directly after whatever button triggered it.
Okay, and it's very convenient that you switched to Storyline because that's what my next question is about.
Okay.
How is skip to navigation handled in Storyline?
Okay, there is no skip to navigation for anything you put on the slide. Let me just add the player. By the way, I highly recommend the modern over the classic player. There are way more accessibility features in the modern player. So let me just add a couple of things here. Seek bar. Okay, so it works a little bit unusually in Storyline. Is as I navigate through the content, and I'm going to just tab directly to my buttons, is you go through the content first. If you're not familiar with skip navigation, is if you have repetitive elements like the menu, a learner should not have to listen to the menu on every single slide. Well, Storyline starts with the slide content, and it puts all that menu stuff at the end. So that's nice. But what if you are done with the slide and you want to start back up at the beginning? Do you really want to have to go through all the player controls to start back up at the beginning? So the way they handle it is if you press tab at the end of the slide, you get this, skip navigation, press enter, return to the slide. I press enter. I'm now back at the top of the slide. It's going to show me, it's going to read the slide title again, and I didn't have to go through the whole player interface to get back to the beginning. So it's a little bit backwards. Like in Lectora, you would get all of your menu stuff first and then your slide content. And so Lectora lets you skip over that. In Storyline, it gives you the content first and then lets you skip the stuff afterwards. So it's a little bit different.
All right, we are right at time, so
Okay.
we're not going to take any more questions. But I do want to read this one audience feedback that says, This is one of the best webinars I've attended on accessibility and screen readers.
Oh,
I need to rewatch to pull out my favorite quotes. And I think that person probably speaks for everyone. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Diane. We really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us today.
Wonderful.
And
thanks for having me. And thanks for doing this.